Hey everybody, Jakob Schiller, Outside Magazine. I run the watch test for Outside. This is Meghan Healy. She's the principal tester on the team. We wanted to give you guys some background on how we test. She's dug into a lot of watches, so I sort of wanted to pick her brain, see what's going on. So Meg, what are some of the sort of most important things that you're looking for when you test watches?
Primarily, I would say I use the watches for testing running. I do them for lots of different exercise. The very first things I want to see are whether the watch is going to track my run. I want to be able to get to the GPS quickly because I want to be able to get out, get my exercise done, get on with my day. So that's the first thing I look at, is whether the GPS picks up quickly enough. Quickly enough for me is maybe
pretty quick.
15 seconds, and then I start to get impatient. It says stand in an open field. Okay, I can wait, but yeah, I want that to pick up pretty quickly. That's one of the more important things. Starting off, yeah.
And have you found that that's pretty consistent? Are they all pretty good, or is it kind of across the board?
I feel like one or two of the watches that I tested a while back, they were pretty slow, but I think they're all kind of getting up to speed now. I think they're pretty on.
Fast.
Yeah.
What are you really dialing in on when you test?
Accuracy, primarily with things like heart rate, step count. That's not something that I would have thought about before testing watches, but it seems important. That particularly if when you're running, it's testing your pace and all these things. It should know how many times your feet are going down, or it's going to be hard to calculate the more complicated statistics, such as your stride length or these things like vertical oscillation and vertical ratio, which are really interesting and can help you with your running training, but only if they're right.
They're accurate. So are you finding that they're all accurate, or are you finding they're all over the place?
So I find some of the watches do better than others with what looks to be like accurate measuring of my heart rate based on my own perception of what my heart rate is, cross comparison among the watches, and kind of knowing that some of the watches I already know are accurate. I can kind of use them as a baseline and check those versus the others, and sometimes they're not so accurate. Particularly, I notice some of the watches, when your heart rate is rising rapidly, they will miscalculate.
Right.
It also does things like, I don't use the watches to tell me really what I should eat, but it'll tell me how many calories I burned. And when it thinks my heart rate was 192 beats a minute, it thinks I'm burning a heck of a lot of calories.
Right, you can eat whatever you want forever.
Yeah, exactly.
What about distance? I think we had talked about that. is it tracking distance? Are they all tracking distance accurately, or is it all over the place?
Well, it's pretty close, but sometimes it surprises me and amuses me when I start them all off at the same spot. The GPS picks up, they're all started, and my first mile will be off maybe by a few yards, and they're all kind of beeping together, and I think, okay, that's good. And then by mile 2, it starts to deviate a little longer. By the time I get farther into a run, like I'm on my 7th or 8th mile, it'll be a couple hundred yards apart, and that's where I start to get a little concerned.
What does a typical week look like for you? So I know you do a lot of various things, and talk about why it's important that a watch can track everything you do.
So in a week, I start out the day, I do about 45 minutes to an hour of yoga every day. I do kind of bigger runs 3 or 4 times a week, and then sprinkled in, I often do little runs here and there. Often I'm running errands or picking up kids, and I'll just take a mile or two, run. I do a fair bit of walking, and then biking, mostly again kind of for errands, not as much like competitive biking or speed biking. And then I do some other side things, Zumba and dancing and some strength training and stuff, a fair bit of swimming, horseback riding, and some martial arts, capoeira. So I want, with those, the big thing is running. That's where I want to see improvement. That's where I want to be training. But the other activities, if the watches kind of accurately get a gauge of how hard I'm working, because I want to know how fatigued my muscles should feel. I know how they do feel, but if the watch is going to predict what my next workout should be or how I'm progressing in my training, it's got to be able to measure some of these other things to get a gauge of
everything. Totally awesome. And have the watches been able to keep up?
Some of them track more specific items than others. Some of them get uber specific and actually will track. It's like the list of activities is almost too long. I don't need the difference between aerobic dancing and cardio box dancing and step aerobics. It's fine. Aerobics is fine. On the other hand, some of them are missing important activities, I sometimes end up playing some soccer or something like that. Some of them don't have ball sports on there. However, a lot of times on these other activities, it's more just the basics. You want to know how high your heart rate's got up, how long you went, to get an idea of how much it's going to sort of fatigue your body. And for a few things like horseback riding, this can be a problem. A lot of the watches, none of the watches that I've seen so far, stop counting your own steps when you get on a horse. When you get on a bike, the watch knows that you're not making
Walking.
that distance on your feet. But when you get on a horse, the watches don't know that. They think every horse footfall is your footfall, so it ends up dramatically up counting how much you've walked that day.
Tell us about the interfaces. Are there some that just nail it in terms of being able to get into the watch and some others, or are they all pretty consistent these days?
So some of them are more intuitive. Like I pick up the watch and I'm like, oh, okay, I already seem to know how to work this, even though I've never seen this brand before. Whereas other ones I have to, mess around with the instruction manual or find some way to figure out how to get to certain menus. So yeah, some of them are more intuitive. That might be that they're more like other watch brands. But they I think overall they're getting better, kind of probably getting feedback from reviewers and taking notes and figuring out what people complain about and fixing that so that they're mostly pretty good with the interfaces. And sometimes you can customize what you see during a workout. Others kind of it's like you get what you get. The number one thing I want to see in a watch is the time. We're all busy adults with lots of responsibilities outside of exercising and messing around. So I really like when the watch saves, even if it's off in a little corner, if it just tells you the time so that during the workout, I don't have to press a bunch of buttons to try to figure out what time it is.
Name some others, just sort of like general features, not workout features that you love in a watch.
The sleep tracking on these, it's always kind of really interesting, and it plays into also, fitness and figuring out your workout routine and how tired you might be. I also like just some of the daily features, things like, alarms or timers. I help out with my kids' soccer practice, so a lot of times like stopwatch and timer are really helpful. And then my favorite one of all is the flashlight, which comes in handy more often than you'd think. It's great to just have one on your body that you feel like Inspector Gadget. And some of them have started, a lot of them used to have the watch face light up, which creates just kind of a glow, but it's kind of a pain to light things up. But some of the newer ones put the flashlight out of the top of the watch, so then you can light up your path.
And last question for now, what about size? Like, how do you feel about, you're not tiny, but you have smallish wrists, but the watches are pretty big. So how do you deal with size?
Yeah, so initially when I think, you gave me one of these bigger watches to test, and it's kind of like, oh my God, this thing's a Hulk. But I've noticed some big trade-offs with the larger watches. They do have bigger batteries, and so they last longer, which is a huge plus. Also, I've noticed that after a couple of days, I stopped noticing. At this point, I can wear 3 watches to sleep, and I don't even notice anymore. So I think, everybody's got their own personal preferences, but I think you could also probably stop. But I did mention before that doing yoga and some activities, you don't want the watch's profile to be out of control or the buttons to be in places that are inconvenient and get tapped accidentally. So they've gotten better at that, about putting buttons on diagonals and keeping the watch overall profile lower. Also in the winter with sleeves, you're often your long sleeves will get in the way and hit buttons, so you don't want that. Also, you want to be able to pull your sleeves over the watch if it's too big.
Thank you so much, Meg.
Thanks, Jacob.